As you program more and more, you start to see patterns in the code that are familiar from other projects you've done. So for example, here's a maze and a cat, and I have two of the arrow keys with code on them to allow me to move and not go through the walls. So the cat can go back and forth, but doesn't go into the black. And this is what we used in the maze game project. Now, one disadvantage of this is, let's say I decided that 10 steps was too big a jump and I wanted to make it go down to 5. I have to edit it here, I have to edit it here, here, and here, and really I'd have to probably edit it for the up and down keys as well. So any place that code gets reused, if you start to copy it, you have to start changing all the different copies of it every time you want to tweak your program a little bit to make it be a little smoother. So now I don't move quite as fast inside the maze. I'm going to show you a neat thing we can do that helps clean up your code, makes it easier for other people to read, and also makes it easier to not have to edit it over and over again like this. I'm going to go into more blocks, and eventually blocks are going to be in here, but we haven't made any yet. So this is where we're going to make our own blocks, kind of like these other blocks that already exist in Scratch. So I'm going to click Make a Block. And really this is a bit of a mysterious thing here. It's hard to see what it wants you to do, but what I want you to do here is type in a name for the new block. So I'm going to call this Move in Free Space. In other words, I want a block that only lets me move in the white. There's some options here. You can decide whether the block should take in values. So for example, move right now takes in a value, and I want to have that same functionality. So I'm going to add a number input. Input is what goes into the block. Notice that it already has a little white space here, kind of like the move block does, and it says that it's a number. If I wanted to, I can change this to say like how many steps, to remind me what that number is going to be for. So I'm going to hit OK now, and with this big funny header here, it just says define this new block, move in free space, that takes in a number of how many steps, and we see the block starts to show up down here. So I'm going to grab my code, and again there's two copies of it here, right? So I can grab either one, they're exactly the same, and add it down here. And I'm going to take this is sort of like a variable, it's called a parameter, and copy it. Instead of moving 5 steps, I want to use the value of whatever the person types. So if they typed in 10 here, that would get passed in to this new block, or I should say over here. If they typed in 1, that value 1 gets associated with how many steps, just like a variable does. That's the name of it, and that's the value. And any place you see it, the computer goes and tries to remember what value was used originally. So I'm going to use how many steps forward. Now here's a problem. I want to go how many steps backwards, and remember we had 5 forward and -5 back. So I need to turn this into a negative number. I'm going to go to operators, and if you multiply anything by -1, it turns it into a negative number. I don't think they have anything specific to make anything negative for you. They have some math stuff here, but nothing that says turn it negative. So I'm going to take this, replace that, and type -1 times how many steps. Alright, so when a person uses a MyBlock, they pass a number in, that number gets connected to this name, how many steps, and any place you see how many steps, the computer uses the value that was passed in like this. So now this code will work for any size step, and in fact I can use this block where before I had several blocks. Now I can just use one, and I'm going to go back to moving my 5 distance here. I can just get rid of this and use this again. Use my 5 distance. So notice I had to do a little extra work at the beginning. Once I recognized I was reusing the same code in multiple scripts, I decided to pull it off, define it as a new block, and I had to do a little trickiness to make sure I could keep it general. I could have said move 10 steps and negative 10 steps, but I wanted people to be able to change it like they do with the normal move block. So if I run my code now, it acts really exactly the same as it did before. So you might be thinking like, what? Well, why would do all that work if it does the exact same thing? Well, again, it's easier to change now. I can make like really giant steps here. I only had to change it once per chunk of code, not twice, and so that's a little bit easier. And now when I go, it takes the big steps. But I think the other advantage is, look how nice and neat this is now. I can have a much larger program and people can kind of look at it, and it's not lots and lots of blocks to remember. All you have to do in your mind is know, oh, move in free space lets me move where it's not black, and you don't have to remember exactly how you did it anymore. You can kind of sort of forget about it and just start using it like a normal Scratch block. So I think you need to do quite a bit of Scratch programming and start building bigger and bigger projects before you really start to see the benefit of the more blocks, making blocks of your own. But they are a really great thing to do to get more advanced in programming. And you can imagine doing something else, anything you want to do, like draw a square. That's one of the first things we did, right? We had to draw a square, and options, maybe I'll let you see how big the square should be. Side length. Now if I want to define this one, I would just take code, move 10, turn 90 degrees, and do that repeated 4 times. And I need a pen down and a pen up, just to leave it in the same way it was before. So all of a sudden now, this is going to be kind of silly, but in my more blocks I have this draw a square, and I can save size 20, and I'm going to add that into my motion keys. I have no idea really what that's going to look like. But now when I move, I've drawn a square when I do that kind of stuff. So all of a sudden now I can add all sorts of fun new features to Scratch of my own invention, and I don't have to wait for Scratch to provide them for me. I can figure out how to combine the existing blocks into a new block that lets me do more complicated things in a very easy way. So give that a try and think about how you can use these blocks in your own projects.